The federal government has a role in housing by enforcing non-discrimination laws and assisting low-income families and the elderly with safe and adequate shelter, especially through the use of housing vouchers. Homeownership is an important goal, but public policy must be balanced to reflect the needs of Americans who choose to rent. A comprehensive housing policy should address the demand for apartments and multifamily housing. Any assistance should be subject to stringent oversight to ensure that funds are spent wisely. Infrastructure. Building the future. America's infrastructure networks are critical for economic growth, international competitiveness, and national security. Infrastructure programs have traditionally been nonpartisan. Everyone recognizes that we all need clean water and safe roads, rail, bridges, ports, and airports. The current administration has changed that, replacing civil engineering with social engineering as it pursues an exclusively urban vision of dense housing and government transit. In the vaunted stimulus package, less than 6% of the funds went to transportation, with most of that to cosmetic shovel-ready projects rather than fundamental structural improvements. All the while, the Democrats' Davis-Bacon law continues to drive up infrastructure construction and maintenance costs for the benefit of that party's union stalwarts, what most Americans take for granted. The safety and availability of our water supply is in perilous condition. Engineering surveys report crumbling drinking water systems, aging dams, and overwhelmed wastewater infrastructure. Investment in these areas, as well as with levees and inland waterways, can renew communities, attract businesses, and create jobs. Most importantly, it can assure the health and safety of the American people. The nation's ports have become a bottleneck in international trade. America's exporters sometimes use Canadian ports in order to reach the world market in a timely manner. With the widening of the Panama Canal, our East Coast and Gulf ports have an extraordinary opportunity to boost container traffic, but require major improvement to remain competitive receivers of large vessels. Interstate infrastructure has long been a federal responsibility shared with the states, and a renewed federal-state partnership and new public-private partnerships are urgently needed to maintain and modernize our country's travel lifelines to facilitate economic growth and job creation. In the last 2 years, congressional Republicans have taken the lead with initiatives like the FAA Modernization and Reform Act, the Pipeline Safety, Regulatory Certainty, and Job Creation Act, and the Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation Act. The recent highway bill reforming the federal highway program included some key reforms. It will shorten the project approval process, eliminate unnecessary programs, and give states more flexibility to address their particular needs. It is a return to the principles of federalism, and it contains not a single earmark. It should be followed by reform of the 42-year-old National Environmental Policy Act to create regulatory certainty for infrastructure projects, expedite their timetables, and limit litigation against them. Securing sufficient funding for the Highway Trust Fund remains a challenge given the debt and deficits and the need to reduce spending. Republicans will make hard choices and set priorities, and infrastructure will be among them. In some states with elected officials dominated by the Democratic Party, a proportion of highway funds is diverted to other purposes. This must stop. We oppose any funding mechanism that would involve governmental monitoring of every car and truck in the nation. Amtrak continues to be, for the taxpayers, an extremely expensive railroad. The public has to subsidize every ticket nearly $50. It is long past time for the federal government to get out of way and allow private ventures to provide passenger service to the Northeast Corridor. The same holds true with regard to high-speed and intercity rail across the country. International trade. More American jobs, higher wages, and a better standard of living. International trade is crucial for our economy. It means more American jobs, higher wages, and a better standard of living. Every $1 billion in additional United States exports means another 5,000 jobs here at home. The free trade agreements negotiated with friendly democracies since President Reagan's trailblazing pact with Israel in 1985 facilitated the creation of nearly 10 million jobs supported by our exports. That record makes all the more deplorable the current administration's slowness in completing agreements begun by its predecessor and its failure to pursue any new trade agreements with friendly nations. This worldwide explosion of trade has had a downside, however, as some governments have used a variety of unfair means to limit American access to their markets while stealing our designs, patents, brands, know-how, and technology? The intellectual property that drives innovation, the chief offender is China, which has built up its economy in part by piggybacking onto Western technological advances, manipulates its currency to the disadvantage of American exporters, excludes American products from government purchases, subsidizes Chinese companies to give them a commercial advantage, and invents regulations and standards designed to keep out foreign competition. The current administration's way of dealing with all these violations of World Trade Standards has been a virtual surrender. Republicans understand that you can succeed in a negotiation only if you are willing to walk away from it. Thus, a Republican president will insist on full parity in trade with China and stand ready to impose countervailing duties if China fails to amend its currency policies. Commercial discrimination will be met in kind. Counterfeit goods will be aggressively kept out of the country. Victimized private firms will be encouraged to raise claims in both U.S. courts and at the World Trade Organization. Punitive measures will be imposed on foreign firms that misappropriate American technology and intellectual property. Until China abides by the WTO's government procurement agreement, the United States government will end procurement of Chinese goods and services, because American workers have shown that, on a truly level playing field, they can surpass the competition in international trade. We call for the restoration of Presidential Trade Promotion Authority. It will ensure up or down votes in Congress on any new trade agreements, without meddling by special interests. A Republican president will complete negotiations for a Trans-Pacific Partnership to open rapidly developing Asian markets to United States products. Beyond that, we envision a worldwide multilateral agreement among nations committed to the principles of open markets, what has been called a Reagan economic zone, in which free trade will truly be fair trade for all concerned. A 21st century workforce. The greatest asset of the American economy is the hardworking American. The high rates of unemployment over the last 3.5 years, disastrously high among youth, minorities, and veterans, have thus been a tragic waste of energy and ideas, compounded by the waste of billions in stimulus funds with no payoff in jobs. The chief cause has been an unprecedented uncertainty in the American free enterprise system. Due to the overreaching policies of the current administration, nothing matters more than getting the American people back to work. In addition to cutting spending, keeping taxes low, and curtailing bureaucratic red tape, we must replace outdated policies and ineffectual training programs with a plan to develop a 21st century workforce to make the most of our country's human capital. It is critical that the United States has a highly trained and skilled workforce. 9 federal agencies currently run 47 retraining programs at a total cost of $18 billion annually with dismal results. Both the trainees in those programs and the taxpayers who fund them deserve better. We propose consolidation of those programs into state block grants so that training can be coordinated with local schools and employers. That will be critically important if states establish personal re-employment accounts, letting trainees direct resources in ways that will steer them toward long-term employment, especially through on-the-job training with participating employers. We can accelerate the process of restoring our domestic economy and reclaiming this country's traditional position of dominance in international trade by a policy of strategic immigration, granting more work visas to holders of advanced degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math from other nations. Highly educated immigrants can assist in creating new services and products. In the same way, foreign students who graduate from an American university with an advanced degree in science, technology, engineering or maths should be encouraged to remain here and contribute to economic prosperity and job creation. Highly skilled, English-speaking, and integrated into their communities, they are too valuable a resource to lose. As in past generations, we should encourage the world's innovators and inventors to create our common future and their permanent homes here in the United States. Republicans believe that the employer-employee relationship of the future will be built upon employee